It's a great honor for me to be here at the Empire Club of Canada today, which is arguably the most famous and historically relevant speakers podium to have ever existed in Canada. It has offered its podium to such international luminaries as Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, Audrey Hepburn, the Dalai Lama, Indira Gandhi, and closer to home, from Pierre Trudeau to Justin Trudeau. Literally generations of our great nation's leaders, alongside with those of the world's top international diplomats, heads of state, and business and thought leaders.
It is a real honor and a distinct privilege to be invited to speak to the Empire Club of Canada, which has been welcoming international diplomats, leaders in business and in science and in politics. When they stand at that podium, they speak not only to the entire country, but they can speak to the entire world.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 119th season of the Empire Club of Canada. I'm delighted to be here with you and our esteemed speakers today. Thank you for your participation and support. This incredible community of colleagues and peers is the driving force behind our mandate to engage, debate, and advance the dialogue on issues of importance to Canadians. Welcome. My name is Sal Rabani, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the Empire Club of Canada. To formally begin this afternoon, I want to acknowledge that we're gathering today on the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the homelands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wyandot peoples. We encourage you to learn more about the lands on which you work and live. The Empire Club of Canada is a not-for-profit organization, and I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors who generously support the club and make these events possible and complimentary for our online viewers to attend. Thank you to our lead event sponsor, Insight, and thank you to our season sponsors, Bruce Power and Hydro One. If you require technical assistance, please start a conversation with our team using the chat button on the right-hand side of your screen. We invite questions from the audience by accessing the Q&A function under the video player. Canada is often recognized as a leader in digitalization. However, some may say that implementing IT modernization into our government structure has proved difficult. Today's discussion will help us understand the citizen experience when engaging with governments online and how digital strategies surrounding digital IDs and personal data protection can improve how governments deliver accessible and efficient resources. The Honourable Khalid Rashid, Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery of the Government of Ontario, is working to make Ontario a world-leading digital jurisdiction. He's a champion of Canada's tech industry, and we will welcome him on stage to speak about his recent accomplishments and challenges. To get started, I'd like to invite today's moderator, Jim Love, CIO and Chief Content Officer, IT World Canada, and our esteemed panelists to have a discussion on the ideal citizen experience. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you very much. I wasn't nervous till I saw the video of all the people who occupied this stage. Wow. Welcome to our panel discussion on rethinking the citizen experience online. I'm Jim Love. As I've said, as was said, I'm the CIO and Chief Content Officer of IT World Canada, or ITWC for short. We got a couple of great panelists, and we'll be joined later by the minister himself on this. So we got Craig McLellan, CEO and founder, ThinkOn. Craig, welcome.
Hello, great to be here.
And Victoria Abeling, Senior Director of America's Commercial Security Sales for VMware Carbon Black. Welcome, Victoria.
Welcome. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
I always prefer a brief introduction. I always hate those ones where you feel like people are reading your obituary in there. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves in there as they come in. So Victoria, just want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Victoria Abeling. As Jim said, the Senior Director for Carbon Black at VMware. I run all of the Americas, including Canada. Previously, I've also have worked in the government and public sector for VMware for many years. Excited to be here. Thank you.
And Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called ThinkOn. We're Ontario-based cloud service provider that focuses on heavily on data. So the subjects today are very near and dear to my heart. We service organizations across the globe, actually from our Canadian headquarters.
Great. So let's talk about this. Our panel is titled "Rethinking the Citizen Experience," but I think it's fair to say that the citizen experience means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So, can you share what your vision of the citizen experience is? Victoria, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, as you may know, VMware is a global cloud computing and virtualization company. We have offices all over the world, including Canada. We employ thousands of people, and we're one of the world's largest SaaS providers. We are committed to government IT from the Americas and Canada. We also focus on modernizing and reducing IT complexity. And this year, VMware launched its first ever National Citizen Services Satisfaction Survey, designated and designed to understand the citizen experience when engaging with our governments online. As governments create, ambitious digital strategies, including digital IDs, personal data protection, and we look to improve online experience in general, VMware really wanted to participate and help understand what a good online experience looks like and how we can make that better. And we're excited to share some of the key findings, specifically from the Ontario data with the Empire Club today, and hopefully has some good talking points for everyone.
Yeah, and Victoria, I read the survey, got my copy prior to this. I think there's some interesting stuff in there. We're going to talk about that as well. Craig, do you want to just jump in and tell us a little bit about the citizen experience? And look at this. How can you time it better? I'm just going to the second one, Minister, and then we'll come into you. So we were just talking about what, and Craig will come in on this, but we were just talking about what the citizen experience means to us. So I'll let Craig go, and then I'll introduce you.
Great. Great to see you, Minister. So for me, as a resident of Ontario, I look at this through two different lenses. I look at it through my business lens, and I look at it through my consumer lens. So as a consumer of government services, it's about right place, right time, right data, right level of trust. It's like a checklist for me. And what I really care about is minimizing my personal attack surface, meaning I have one way of logging in for government services, and I rely on that as my authentication mechanism, not having different authentication mechanisms for different ministries, for example. So as a citizen, that's the way I want to consume services. And for me, as a digital first person, I always want to have primary access to the right functions. So for example, I thought I lost my license 2 weeks ago, and I've been renewing my plates online, and then I realized, oops, I cannot receive or order a replacement physical license without attending an office. So to me, that was an example of I think we could do better. But I'm sure there's lots of great security reasons why. So I'm tempered with that. So as a consumer, that's the answer to the question. And then as a provider, what I look for is a consistent framework, and a consistent framework to allow providers to participate in the economy, with the government leading the vision of privacy and data security, and making it clear that there's a easy way to collaborate, because I find that in the dark corners are where bad things begin, and we have to make sure there's no dark corners. And the government needs to lead that for us.
No, absolutely. And I must say that I feel that as a province, we are so behind when it comes to technology and the services that we can provide to Ontarians using technology. And that's the roadmap, or the mandate that I have from Premier is to use technology to provide better services to the residents, but also businesses of this province. So your example of Service Ontario is exactly what we are hoping to achieve in the next few months, or hopefully within this mandate.
Great. The Honourable Khalid Rashid, Minister of Public Business Service Delivery for the Government of Ontario. Thank you for remembering businesses as well in there. And the whole question of what the citizen experience means to all of us, I think is important in there. But I think it's fair to say, over the past few years, there have been there have been a lot of accomplishments by all levels of government. Minister, you talked about Service Ontario, which is, I live in Northern Canada or Northern Ontario. It's a godsend to us to be able to have that services in here. And I think it's been a great example. But over the past few years, governments have done a lot, I think, making services more accessible, responsive, and creating, or at least moving towards it. And I think, Craig, I take your point that there's always a place we can go, and we'll talk about that. But Minister, can you share some of the accomplishments to date, some of the things that you're proud of in the government that we've done to make services more accessible?
No, thank you so much, Jim, and appreciate the opportunity. Look, what we are doing right now within government is to bring more and more services online. As I said earlier, I feel like when it comes to technology, and again, that's just my thinking is that we are behind than other countries, provinces. Like, for example, my brother who lives in Sydney, Australia, has an app called NSW, which is almost like a Service Ontario app that he has on his device, and he can get his driver's license, health card, other government services done online, literally at the tip of the finger and sitting at home. Why can we not do it here in our province? So that's where we are heading. We are really excited to partner with so many private sector organizations. We want, and Premier Ford said this many times, for him, it's all about customer service, whether it's an individual or a business. We want to make sure that we are able to provide those services to the citizens and the businesses of this province. Whether you're renewing your driver's license, health card, your license plate, things that because our objective is to make sure that we are providing and making sure that the next generation is proud of what we are doing for them today. I always say this, my own father, I have said to him thousands of times that, Dad, I'll renew your accessible parking permit by sitting here in the office or at home, but he loves to go to Service Ontario. He'll put his best suit on, he'll go to Service Ontario, stand in the line. So from there, my thinking is that every transaction online is one less person in line. That's how I look at it. So that's how I'm trying to make sure that individuals who would like to go to government offices to get services are able to get it, but also let us look at the future and make sure that we are here to make life easy for the future generation as well too.
Great stuff. Thank you, sir. Craig, any comments on that? And where we are today?
I think it's having been a supplier for some time to some of these back ends, I can tell you that it's been a wholesale change, I would say, over the last 3 to 4 years, with the level of I won't use the word aggressive is not the right word, but there's an eagerness and I would say almost a common sense approach to prioritization, which is always wonderful, because as a business, you crave common sense logic wherever possible, right? Because it allows you to actually engage more openly. So that's been great. But at the same time, I'll tell you, I haven't seen any compromising on the security side. It's still it's an onerous task to become vetted as a supplier and participant in the supply chain, and that's critical because ultimately trust is, we have this amazing advantage being Canadians and being from Ontario, and that trust is something that people just have in us, and we need to make sure that we never put that at risk. So I think that what the ministry is doing, and under the leadership of the minister and the team, is actually really good for the citizens.
Yep. Victoria, your comments?
I think having a digital identity and having security to access any government services is critical. I think about even my own experience. Next week my driver's license is expiring, and I have to go get that renewed. but if you had gone once before, you have to go in the next time. And so there's some weird anomalies when dealing with the government and services that are available. And so having the option and the choice at your fingertips is always more enjoyable. And we have some data that we will point back to from our survey that sort of validate the ease of use and how important it is to have security data, secure, your personal data secure, as well as intuitive systems for people who choose to work or to access online.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where the availability of services is not just a convenience. Where I live, and I live 2 hours north of Toronto in there, it's a necessity for many citizens who can't get out anymore, or who have trouble getting, they just can't get in a car in the middle of winter and drive by themselves. So it gives them the freedom to be able to have those services. I want to go on to this survey. We talked about this earlier. VMware did a survey, and it has some specific findings about Ontarians in there, which I thank you for. It's always great when we hear about Canadians and Ontarians in these surveys, and not just the world in general. So it talked about the feelings about citizen experience, and not surprisingly, it reports that there's been a huge increase in citizens using digital services since the pandemic. And I confess, I knew that, but I was surprised that the survey says almost 9 out of 10 Ontarians have used online services, and almost 7 in 10 prefer to use online services. Victoria, do you want to share some of the key findings of that survey?
Sure. When it comes to online services, I think, like you said, Jim, there was a huge influx and increase of activity around accessibility to your phone, whether you're an iPhone or an Android, as well as even other digital assets. And one thing that Ontario's did state about that they care most from their online experience is that they want it to be simple, right? They want, with 70% of the respondents indicating that this has to be their top consideration. And with that comes enhanced privacy, security measures, and 66% indicated that this would be, a second consideration when choosing to use any type of online service. A number of services available online, Ontarians agreed that the more services available in one place, the better their experiences overall, and the more likely they would recommend or come back a second time, repeatable cases. But the data did suggest that we're not there yet. And I think, a minister said that, here when he was speaking about we've got big goals. 63% of Ontarians are concerned about their personal data being stolen or misused when using these services. And 49 indicated that there are quite too many steps involved, or it's too many clicks, or it's the data is presented in a way that they found confusing. But they are willing to give it a chance. Should it be presented in a way that helps them with navigation and understanding government websites.
Okay, well, let's hold on the security for a second, because I want to do a deeper dive into that. But Craig, any comments on what the survey was talking about in terms of what service, how we prefer our services to be delivered?
As a consumer, makes absolute sense. I would have given the exact same answers, I think. So what I like is that it's being shared publicly. And there's lots of heads nodding, I'm sure, both on and off camera. So I'm actually quite pleased to hear the results.
Great. Minister, your comments on the findings of the survey?
No, absolutely, Jim and Victoria. Thank you for conducting this survey. It actually says the message is what we are trying to deliver here as well too, is that Ontarians, more and more Ontarians would like to get their government services or are able to conduct government services online. And that's exactly what we are heading towards. And I know, Jim, we're going to talk about security and privacy. That is something so important to me. I come prior to becoming the MPP, I was working for a private sector company, and I was so security, and whether it's cybersecurity or privacy, it's so important, and especially from a government perspective, that to your point, we want to build that trust in Ontarians to for them to do business, whether it's online or in person, that they know that this government, their data is protected and this government has their back.
And just we get a question in from someone in the audience, and just as you put them in the comments or the questions as well, and we'll try and cover those as well as while we're doing this discussion. So thank you very much for that, and I will get to your question, the person who asked that. One of the key elements in the VMware survey, you talked about it a bit, Victoria, in there, was, and I have to say it's clearly been my experience as well, as a Canadian publisher, publishing in technology, I get emails every time we publish anything on digital identity. And some of them are, well, let's say, less than polite. Just leave it at that. But it gets people excited. And there's this real and visceral reluctance or concern or even fear about personal information when it's shared with what should be a trusted source in there. Victoria, can you just cover some of those the pieces from the survey as it relates to security and digital identity?
I mean, digital ID is really a hot topic right now. I think if you saw the news this morning, even Turks and Caicos is now saying that they're going to go digital ID by 2025. And while obviously not in Canada, we're just starting to see smaller countries and sovereign countries start going that way. And this is a great question, right? I think this is a top of mind for a lot of folks. And as you guys mentioned, that a lot of federal, private, and governments are looking to design what a digital ID looks like. The survey did state that almost 2 in 3 Ontarians are interested in a personal profile if it allows for great SSO access to some of these government services. And coming from a cybersecurity company, Carbon Black, we all hear this. I hear this daily with my customers, CISOs I talk to, government officials, as well. But on the other side, trust. I think maybe that was you, Craig, that was mentioning trust. Trust is the number one reason for any reluctance in allowing anyone to have their personal data. And 39% are willing to share the data in exchange for these services if they are, guaranteed secure. And we can share these stats, obviously. And then, a couple of the responders always, and this was very consistent actually across the country, and it was no surprise that 92% of Ontario respondents cited security and privacy of information to be accessed with ease and convenience across as one of the most important items when making these type of decisions. And I think if you're a stakeholder or a government entity listening to this, one of the key takeaways should be that this is, something of the future that we want to get to. And digital IDs will be probably a common name or a common term here coming up shortly.
Yeah, very much so. Craig, do you want to talk about this? What you're obviously in the industry and close to what's happening in this. And so what can those in industry do to make cloud and online services more trusted by the public at large?
Well, a couple quick thoughts. I would say one is, what's the saying? Sunlight's the best sanitizer. Mm-hmm. Talking publicly and sharing information publicly about your capabilities and your intent and how you're collaborating with the public sector, I think, is key. So that's, that really helps people appreciate, I think, that there's an effort being made. And then the backside of that, to me, is supply chain. We've talked a lot about supply chain in the last 2.5 years, some of it from some very practical, rudimentary activities. But now in the digital world, the supply chain looks very different. If you think about it for a second, at the federal level, we don't allow our telecoms to be owned by foreign interests. But at the same time, we allow compute infrastructure to be owned by foreign interests, which one could argue is 10 times more challenging. So what the domestic suppliers need to do is to work very closely with the public sector to provide complete transparency to the supply chain, so that we can then communicate how trustworthy the solution is, the citizen's experience is, as opposed to a closed system, which I'm not suggesting it's been a closed system. I'm saying there's always opportunity to provide transparency across all levels of government.
Maybe I'll get controversial here in this, but those of us in industry recognize there are concerns about digital ID. As I said, I get letters all the time. I have to say, I think some of them are unfair or in some cases unfounded. We're willing to give up a huge amount of information on a form or on Facebook or a physical ID card. We'll gladly hand somebody our driver's license, but we're hugely suspicious and reluctant when that's a digital experience. Minister, what can the government do, if anything, to make the public more comfortable?
Jim, I completely agree with both Victoria and Craig. I think the word trust is the most important word here. And as a government, one of the things, my responsibility is to make sure that any service or anything, whether it's digital credential, online services that we bring online, there is the trust factor is there. We saw when we were working on the the Verify Ontario app, the COVID, the Government of Ontario COVID app that we developed in-house here earlier this year. The number one question was, is my data secure? Privacy, trust. And what we did was that we worked with the Privacy Commissioner from day one. Even when we started from scratch, zero, building the app, we brought the Privacy Commissioner from day one, not after building the app, but since day one, because we wanted that when we go out there in public, that we have the support of the Privacy Commissioner. So whatever we do here in the government, we want to make sure that we have the support from different levels, whether it's Privacy Commissioner, cybersecurity, or anything else, to build that trust in Ontarians that, first of all, the service that we are providing is secure, their data is secure, and only then we'll be able to achieve these services or the targets that we have set for ourselves. So I think trust is the number one thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Anything from the other panelists on that?
Involving the Privacy Commissioner from the very beginning is a brilliant stroke. Key stakeholder, strong opinions, and always thinking about the citizenry's requirements. So I mean, that's Mr. Rashid, that's a bold stroke, and it's a great call to do that. And I was close enough to some certain things that I did see that in action, and I've been a fan. As much as the guardrails that a Privacy Commissioner can put in place, it does really give us an environment where I think the art of the possible becomes a little more realistic. So kudos to you on that.
Yeah, I would say in Ontario, we've had a great history of Privacy Commissioners and being, with the advice of build it in now, don't try to bolt it on later. I commend you, Minister, for that strategy, because it certainly isn't there. Victoria, any reaction to that as well?
Well, I was going to mention that, not surprising, part of the survey did say that there is still a big need for a 1-800 number to talk to a live agent and also to have online chat. So while we are talking about the future of, digital transformation and personal data with health cards and IDs, there is still a high need for making sure that there is help when needed, like a live agent or online chat as well.
Great. Yeah. I'm just going to go to a couple of questions, and we may have covered them, but I want to respect the audience putting these questions in there. So one says, I wonder about the data on accessing virtual health services. How did Ontarians feel, and are they more concerned about data privacy? I don't remember that from the survey. Was there anything particular in terms of health data in the survey, Victoria?
There wasn't, but I'm going to go. I saw that, so I started looking through just to make sure I didn't miss something. I think we were very generic with the term data, and we're very just the questions were very focused on, in general, government services. But there was nothing specific that called out health versus, government ID per se. And it was just really about personal data. So you can argue that personal data would be, part of personal data would be health.
Yeah, certainly. It's something my own doctor, I think I was just so surprised when I actually saw a computer on his desk, because he used to talk about not having the internet in his office. So I think we've advanced to the point where we are getting a lot more health information on systems, and it is important to protect it. Craig, any comments on that?
Well, I'll just say that I think it's one of the top 2 opportunities in front of the minister's entire ministry to drive collaboration, because despite we spend lots of money on healthcare, we're very, very fortunate to have what we have, and we have to find ways to be more innovative and more collaborative. And I just went through a process of my 4th form for effectively the same thing with 4 different care providers. I think that particular area of the public sector is ripe for process automation, which leads itself to digital citizenry support, but not at the risk of privacy. So that another opportunity to get the privacy commissioner involved early, because man, if there's anything that gets people hotter, it's losing control of their health record.
And Minister, I think there's access to healthcare is a huge issue for all of us in there. It's not really your portfolio, but it's still making that available and accessible and safe is a real part of citizen services. Is that something that you think about? I'm sure you do, but could you share those thoughts with us?
No, absolutely, Jim. Actually, part of my ministry's mandate is to work with other ministries when it comes to any digital or technological move. I don't like to call myself the mothership, but that's what it is now, that any ministry within the government, whenever they are planning to implement anything, when it comes to technology, they have to work with us. And that's why part of my direction to the ministry and other ministries is that when you're coming to us with some programs or services, the number one thing is that it has to be on cloud, because we as a government are moving to a cloud infrastructure, because I don't want mainframe systems to be in basements of ministries. And it goes back to what Victoria and Craig were talking about, the cybersecurity and the privacy. So that's number one. Number two, my very first meeting after becoming the minister was with actually Minister of Health, where we talked about the data, health data. We want to make sure that we have the system in place, and this is all part of our data authority implementation, that we have the data available for others to access. But the thing that we are working on is again the privacy side. I can put data online in the cloud tomorrow. As we all know, it's not no-brainer, it's easy. But then I need to also make sure that, because I have 15 million Ontarians who are looking at me to make sure that their data is secured. So in order to do that, I have to make sure that I am earning their trust and making sure that we are able to do things in a secured manner, as compared to a private organization. For me, I have 15 million stakeholders that I have to work with.
Yeah. Don't you wish some days maybe you got lands and forests or something like that?
But it is an exciting ministry. We are the game changer, and whatever we are doing today is for this generation, but most importantly is for the next generation.
Right. Yeah. Just go back to our audience again, Victoria. This echoes back to what you were talking about, the 1-800 number. Somebody says, I'm 74 years young. Yes, you are still young. Trust me. And I believe that the government in moving forward must consider the way that some of us are one generation away from being computer literate. And gentleman or lady goes on to say, I'm not computer savvy, I understand it lines as well. This is something that came up in the survey, but the 1-800 number as well for there at Victoria.
Yeah, so similar, right? I mean, I think that one thing that came out of the survey was probably not surprising that the respondents between 18 and 34 all, would prefer some sort of online digital access. But we also have to be very careful to understand that we are, Ontario is a very multicultural province, and we do have to think about accessibility outside the traditional criteria to make sure that all Ontarians have access to these services. And I mentioned 1-800 calling, but also live chat, and then I also think to echo that one person online is one less in line, that anyone who is going to a government office can get that in a timely fashion, can be in and out of there with with less pain of waiting for hours, and get whatever they need done in that time period, understanding what paper they need, what needs to be completed ahead of time so that they're in and out. But I also think that 74 years young is not too late to learn anything. I'm on the phone with my mother constantly, helping her myself get up to date, and she now runs a how-to training for her friends in her Young at Heart group. So I happy to help anyone else. So
yeah, go for it. Yeah, it's not as difficult as it seems, and we blame ourselves. I think we blame ourselves because sometimes the things that are built are not that accessible for people, and I think that's a good thing. Minister, I see you nodding. Did you comment on that?
No, actually, I was just saying, Victoria said it so well. Even my own parents, they're using their cell phones now to provide to get services online, and my mom, she loves her Amazon account because she keeps it's easy. But I just want to say one thing here. As a government, for us is, yes, digital first, but not digital only. Because we want to make sure that, as I said earlier, like my parents, they still like to go and get services in person at times. We want them to continue to have those services. But if somebody would like to get their services online, well, guess what? Now you have the device to get it done. So we are trying to keep a balance. But again, going back to the same, digital first, but not digital only.
Yeah. Great question again from the audience in here. And I think that this is proof that I don't draft all the good questions. What are your views on digital equity? Now, and it goes on to say, we face serious barriers that go beyond access, skills, bullying, trust. How can Ontario support digital equity as we modernize services? Can I throw that first to you, Minister?
Yeah, no, sure. Absolutely. We need to make sure that Ontarians have access to digital services, and that's our goal. That's why, as a government, we are tremendously making some serious investments to make sure that Ontarians are able to get the services they deserve as Ontarian. And Premier Ford has been very clear. He wants to make sure that Ontarians are able to get these services, and services should be available for everyone, not just a handful of individuals, but for everyone. And that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Jim,
Craig. Yep, Victoria, jump in. Yeah, please.
So one thing I did want to point out and reinforce is that another call out from the survey was, when I think about digital equity, and I think about the fact that multi-language and having support for all languages is going to be a big call out for the government as well.
Yeah, making that available, and multilingual systems are certainly, I think it's also one of the best ways that people can approach the government services if they're not, if English is not their first language in there.
Jim, if I may just quickly add
Absolutely, sir.
something. By the way, I'm really enjoying this conversation. I thank you so much for putting this panel together. Uh, we are actually, and to your point, what Victoria just said, we want Ontarians, because as Victoria has said previously, we are such a multicultural society. So we would like every Ontarian to have access, and that's why we are investing heavily on broadband as well too, bringing broadband into communities where there is no internet services at times, so that it's equal for everyone, and then everyone can get the same level of services they deserve.
Absolutely. Craig, any comments on that? On this whole idea of digital equity and
Yeah, a couple
inclusion?
quick things. Yeah, I think as you know, representative of the private sector that works with the public sector, I think there's opportunities for all of us to seriously consider the user experience across a multitude of systems to make systems easier to use and make them more logical, make sure that they adhere to accessibility regulations that are now in place. Just simple adherence. I realize simple is not simple, but focusing on adhering to what you can adhere to ultimately rises a tide that floats all boats. So that an experience working with an insurance company online translates into being able to work better with something from the public sector where I'm trying to renew something. Just the experience, it's a comfort level. It's trust, but it's also trust in yourself to say, I trust myself enough to be confident that I can use the system because the user experience isn't confusing to me. And we in general, I think a lot of the time, push aside the user experience for haste because we really want to get something online, and in the process we end up with some less than stellar user experiences.
Yeah, and if I can put in just a bit of a commercial for businesses in Ontario, especially, there's a lot of smart people out there in smaller tech businesses and medium-sized tech business. Not always the giants, and the giants are great, but there's a lot of people out there who make really great contributions to accessibility and making services better. We've got a great digital mindset in this province, which is a great for all of us in there. Just leaping out into that. Just we wrap up, I'd like to just get each of you to share what your vision is of a future online citizen experience. We talked about where we've been. We talked about the necessity for security. We talked about the things we have done. What's the vision that you would share? What in this? And I'm going to start with you, Victoria, and say you've coming out of this survey that you've done, taken on a lot of data and a lot of aspirations, a lot of requests from people, and a lot of thought in it. What vision did you come up with, leaping off that report into what the future should be?
So if you think about it, there's so many channels now. We're almost, it's multi channels. You think about digital, online, virtual experiences. I think that when you think about what the end result would be, what the outcome is an ability and availability for anyone who has a need to engage with the government on specific services, whether it's healthcare, digital ID, renewing a license, registering for even marriage license, anything like that, is done in a way that it allows them to consume that the way they want to consume, whether that is through a push of a button on an app, whether that's walking into an office that is, that allows them to consume in that way. But if you think about where a lot of apps are going, it's also around one app to do all of that. And if it's an application online, if it's something on your phone, I see where we're going is in that way. I think about when I travel personally, how easy it is for me now. I have Clear, they scan my eyes. I feel 100% confident that they know who I am. Sometimes I've forgotten my ID and been lucky because I have Clear. And I think about how we're going to that, into that world In cybersecurity, we talk a lot about what the future looks like. What would a fingerprint look like? What if we were, what if you had, sensors in places that weren't just on your endpoint? And where are those endpoints, right? So it is something top of mind. And, I constantly think about what that, what that future world would look like. And then just, kind of circle it back to what the survey said and what the Ontarians are asking for. It is one app for government services. So you kind of tie all that back together and you've got, multi-channel availability of these services for your people, for your, neighbors, your businesses, your customers.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Craig, I'm going to give you 2 minutes and then we're going to turn it over to the minister for his remarks and he can wrap up on this topic or just go into his own remarks if he likes at this point. Craig, what's the vision of the future for
couple quick
services?
thoughts here. So first of all, if you deal, when you deal with multiple levels of the public sector, you realize that the data that we're talking about exists in different forms in different places. And my vision, if I had a blank sheet of paper, which I realize is somewhat silly to even suggest, is to look at data holistically at all levels of the public sector so that organizations can actually collaborate and have similar, if not identical, policies with respect to how we protect data. So for instance, data that's considered protected B at the federal level doesn't have a consistent standard at the provincial level, yet it's the exact same piece of data. We need to see collaboration across those levels of government because ultimately once the data is out, it's out. Like, you can't get it back in the bottle, so to speak. So that's one area that I think is very important. And the second area of vision from my perspective is if we're calling it citizen government and citizen access, then I don't know how much citizens are involved in the input around prioritization or not, but it seems to me there's opportunities for citizens to actually, I'll say, vote, share feedback on what is important to them, not only for their own use, but also for the, the broader public sector in general, taking into account some of the accessibility and more marginalized groups and what we can do to help them be part of the discussion. So those are my two areas where I see opportunity.
Great. And I'm going to thank the panel. Craig McLellan, CEO and founder of ThinkOn. Craig, we've met before. Thank you. Great to meet you again in there. Victoria Abeling. I'm so sorry. Thanks, Craig. And Victoria Abeling from VMware Carbon Black. I never know which one I'm talking about, but I think they're both the same. Right? Okay. So Victoria, thank you so much in there. Hope you've enjoyed this. And I'm going to turn it over to our special guest, the Honorable Khalid Rashid, Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery for the Government of Ontario, to make a few closing remarks in there. Minister?
No, first of all, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate, you having me here and being part of such a wonderful panel, both Victoria and Craig. Thank you so much for all the great work you are doing, and thank you for your input. And Craig, to your point, absolutely. One of the things that I focus on with my team is always whenever we are launching any product or services that we go out in the market and get feedback, because that's the most important thing. We want to hear from Ontarians as to what they are looking for from their government when it comes to digital government. And that's why this year when we formed government and the new cabinet was announced, as most of you may know, I was actually Ontario's first ever associate minister of digital government. And that at that time, it showed Ontarians that this premier was very serious about providing services to Ontarians and businesses using technology. And then when I became the Minister of Public and Business Service Delivery, we continued to have a digital government inside this ministry, because I believe that both public and business and digital government works hand in hand, and we need to continue the collaboration. And honestly, rebuilding Ontario's economy and unlocking its full potential are the key priorities of our government, and improving the way government serves the public and businesses is so crucial to building a modern province. the province we all love. And we are doing honestly so by providing easy to use online services with quicker delivery than ever, and that's the most important thing. When you have a premier or as I say, the boss who is a champion of customer service and service delivery, you want to make sure that you are able to live up to his expectations, and that is exactly what we are doing, providing the best service or customer service possible to Ontarians. And what we have discussed today, or what I've outlined, is a big leap forward for the future generations of people and businesses in Ontario. And as Victoria said, why can we not do everything by, from our device and having just one app? We need to do, we need to take bold steps. It's like now or never. So, and honestly, I look forward to working with our partners, such as yourselves, to make inclusion, accessibility we talked about, and a robust suite of digital options, the default settings in interacting with government, and like honestly, we are just getting started. So thank you so much again for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you all today. And thank you once again for joining Premier Ford and I on this incredible journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Jim. And thanks again to our sponsors, Insight, Bruce Power, and Hydro One. Thank you to VMware for your collaboration on this event, our panelists, and everyone joining us today. As a club of record, all Empire Club of Canada events are available to watch and listen to on demand on our website. A recording of this event will be available shortly, and everyone registered will receive an email with the link. On Tuesday, December the 13th, join us in person for a highly anticipated address and conversation titled Opportunities and Challenges in the Era of Polycrisis, with special guest Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Program. We will review some of the setbacks and achievements of 2022 and discuss the status of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. On Wednesday, December the 14th, join us in conversation with Ontario Minister Puri, Minister of Mines, Chief Wabase, Michael Fox on how the province, the First Nation, and the private sector are working together to make the Ring of Fire a reality, protect the environment, enable further regional partnerships, and First Nations self-determination. Thanks again for joining us today. This meeting is now adjourned.